Hello and welcome to our Friday webinar. Sorry, hit the table. We got Dr. Stephanie Lamb back on with us. Welcome, Dr. Lamb.
Hello.
Howdy.
Nice to
So
see you.
we're going. This is awesome. You're gonna walk us through a spotlight on 14 Peruvian parrots.
A lot.
Species? A lot. Okay. So we have a lot of parrots to cover, but before we get started, just a very gentle reminder: if you have a question, we'll do it towards the end of the webinar, and to use the Q&A button feature and not the chat feature. Okay. So we have very, very special guests. We were just talking about this in the preamble up to the webinar. Do you want to introduce the
Sure.
I'll
Yeah.
let you.
So I was going to, because today we're talking about the Peruvian parrots, all these, birds that are in Peru. I was going to bring my macaw, but one of my other parrots, who is definitely not from Peru, has been sick this last week. So she had to come in today to get some blood redrawn to assess how her kidneys are functioning, because she's having some kidney problems right now. So I wanted to show her to you guys. Her name is Miss Mo, and she's actually a Port Lincoln parrot. So she's actually an Australian species. So it's just a species you don't really see too commonly in captivity anymore. They're kind of more of like an aviary bird, ones that aren't as handleable. And she's like not too interested in being handled, but there she is. That's Miss Mo. I'm trying to turn her around. She's in this funny little cage because she actually has some neurologic problems. Trying to turn her so you guys can kind of see her. There we go.
There she is.
Um, she I got her actually from one of my clients, who sadly my client passed away. But I got her from her. She had been taking care of her for many years. Miss Mo here has some neurologic problems that makes it so she really can't perch. A portion of her brain called the cerebellum, which is the portion of our brain that helps us to like maintain balance, just isn't formed appropriately. She actually had an MRI done up in Utah. And we found that on the MRI that she had a little bit of an abnormal cerebellum. So she can't really perch. So she kind of just hangs out on the bottom of her cage, and she kind of sometimes has very exaggerated movements because she can't coordinate her body as well as normal. But she gets around and does okay. So I wanted to show her to you guys because she's not a common species that you see much in the parrot pet trade. So kind of an interesting species, but Australian.
Wow, she's in good hands, I think. So
Well, hopefully, we're hoping that her kidney values look better because she's been going through some treatments this week. So we'll see if we've got some improvements with her.
oh, okay. So we gotta I think I made you co-host. You always do these fabulous PowerPoints, so I expect nothing less now.
Yep. So I do have a PowerPoint for you guys. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And then we can start talking more about the Peruvian parrots we're going to go to. There we go. All right. So, when we did a previous species spotlight, it was back in, I think, January or February of this last year. I think it was. I had gone to Chile, and I got to see the Patagonian conure, and I was really excited about it. And so that kind of got us started with this species spotlight, where we can talk about different species of parrots out in the wild, and getting to go and observe them out there, doing what they should be doing out in the wild all day long, flying around, socializing, eating, all that stuff. So I had done a trip actually prior to the one that I did last December, where I got to see the Patagonian conure. I actually had gone to Peru back in 2019. So it's been several years, but it was a really great trip that was fun and really focused on getting to see a lot of parrots that live in the Amazon. So I wanted to share that with you guys today, all the different species that I got to see of parrots. We saw actually more than just parrots, of course. There were other species of birds that we saw, and we even saw jaguar, which was really neat. But we're going to focus on the parrots, of course. So, all right. I put this picture of me out there in the wild with all the other people who went on this trip. We're all looking for birds out in the rainforest. You can see us just surrounded by lots of amazing vegetation. Everybody with their little binoculars and just sort of camped out, looking up in the trees and up in the sky, trying to identify different birds that are flying past. And actually, this particular place that we went to, back here along the slope of the river that we were coming off of, you can see this is actually one of the clay licks that parrots will go to. Now, at that particular moment when this photo was taken, there were no parrots on the clay lick, but we'll see other pictures where those parrots are there. So first off, where exactly is Peru? So I've given you guys some maps here to get an idea of help you identify where in the world we are. So Peru is in South America. Here's my nice picture of South America. It's on that western, sort of northwestern border of, well, I guess I should say central to north western border of the continent of South America. And then just a little bit more closely, here is the country of Peru. And we were in a particular area called Tambopato, which is about in this area over here. So there's lots and lots of different species of parrots that are out there. And again, lots of other species of birds. Now, when I did the species spotlight originally, when we were looking at the Patagonian conure, I had given you this nice little phylogenetic tree to kind of show you how these different species are related. And I wanted to bring that up again because a lot of times when we're out in the wild and we're observing birds, we will look at different species and try to think oh, how are they related? So these phylogenetic trees kind of map that out for us and show us how different species are related to one another. So sort of just broadly, the Aves class has many, many different groups within it. And in particular, we're looking at this group up here, which is, this really tiny little branch up at the top in the Neo-Aves segment, in the Euphalconomorphae group. And within that group, we actually have the falcons, the psittacines, and the passerines. So interestingly, the birds that are sort of most closely related to the psittacines are going to be our passerines, or our little songbirds, and then also falcons are pretty closely related to our psittacines. And then when we look over at this particular phylogenetic tree, this one is actually specific for parrots, showing both living parrots and some parrots that are extinct. And when we're looking specifically at the ones that are down in Peru, it's this nice little chunk right here. So I blew it up, took it out and blew it up. And you can actually see it's a big group that includes the Amazons, the Pionis, the macaws, and many, many others. So we're going to talk about various individuals within that group today. Okay, so just real broadly for a moment, there were, again, about 14 different species of birds that I saw, or 14 different species of parrots that were out there. Some of them are pretty well known in the pet trade. So we have a picture of some scarlet macaws, and a green-winged macaw and blue and gold, which I think most people know of those particular parrots because they are just so common in the pet trade. But then there's some other species of smaller macaws, like the severe or chestnut-fronted macaw, and then also some Amazons and Brotigerus parrots as well. And then another big group of individuals that I saw that were out there. Again, a couple different types of Amazons. We have some Pionis that were out there, the blue-headed Pionis, some different species of macaws and conures, the white-bellied caique, which was actually, I thought, really cute and fun to see. That was probably one of my favorite ones to actually see out there in the wild. And then, some individuals that we like rarely actually even see in the pet trade at all, the orange-cheeked parrot. This is an example of one. This was not a picture that I took. In fact, you can see my photo credits at the bottom here, because although I love going out and seeing birds in the wild, I am not the most skilled photographer. Not one of the things that I am necessarily good at. So I needed pictures that were a little bit better representation of a lot of these species so that you guys can get a little bit closer up photo of the individuals that we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so we'll start off with the scarlet macaw. And the place where we were staying at is actually a place that people can go to visit on their own and have experiences observing birds in the wild, just like I did. It's called the Tambopata Research Center, and they actually have a few different locations that you can stay at. So it's an eco lodge. And the different stations that you can kind of stay at, may do things a little bit differently from one to the next. So basically it's this broad group that you're able to go out and stay in these really neat little, I would say hotel rooms, but they're not really quite hotel rooms because they're out in the rainforest, right? And interestingly, this picture of this one back here, this is just the side of it. And I don't think I actually put a picture of any of the rooms in here. I probably should have, just so people could see. But the way that these rooms were, the lodging rooms that you stay in, they really had 3 walls, and one wall was open so that you could see into the rainforest, which means that anything that's out in the rainforest can also come into your room, which for some people, maybe that's not exciting. For others, it can be fun. So it just depends, I guess, on what your opinion is on that. But you could have little bugs or lizards or little things kind of crawl into your room, but it was kind of fun, and you had to sleep under like mosquito netting, so that the nighttime creatures weren't coming in or anything like that. So again, maybe not for everybody, but I thought it was pretty neat. But this Tambopata Research Center, they actually do research with various species, including the scarlet macaw. And it's really one of the main species that they focus on out there. And through this research center, actually, they've published papers that have been helpful for us as veterinarians working with these animals in captivity. So it's not only helpful for us to know what these animals are doing in the wild and how they are functioning out there, but that information that we get from these wild individuals, it allows us to kind of look at what we're doing in captivity, and helps us to do a better job of caring for these animals that are in captivity. They do like breeding and release of birds, and so some of the birds have become a little bit more habituated to people than maybe is ideal, including this particular individual here. Some of the birds have learned how to just come into the facilities at the appropriate times of day when humans are eating, and may take some of the food items from people. And that's what's happened in this photo, where it was breakfast time, and there were little like muffins or something like that was out on the table, and I don't know if somebody gave this to the bird or the bird picked it up off the table, but here he was sitting on my shoulder, eating his little muffin, and you can see him eating it up there as well. But not too far away from where we were staying at the research center, in fact, extremely close, you can get into a little boat, get down onto the river, and take it out to various observation locations to observe species. And so here's one of the observation stations where we were at. It was probably, I don't remember exactly now, but I want to say maybe like a 10 or 15-minute boat ride from where we were staying to get to this little area where we were able to observe the birds. But this is one of the clay licks, and you can see on the clay lick you have some blue and gold macaws and some scarlets, lots of scarlets actually up here in the trees, and you can see them on the clay licks themselves flying down. I mean, look at this one kind of like launching itself out of the tree. And then when you get a little bit closer look, because it's really great. Well, if you do any of these sort of trips with eco lodges, usually there are guides who are there who not only know where to go, but have the appropriate equipment to allow you to visualize the birds kind of a little bit nicer through spotting scopes. And that's what this image is taking from, is through a spotting scope. You can see a couple of scarlets hanging out on this branch here, hanging out with these macaws. And these photos, if there's no thing at the bottom of the picture, then the photos are photos that are mine. So some of them other people took, like my husband or the guides actually were really great at taking like these spotting scope photos. That's why it looks so nice, as opposed to I probably took this one where the bird's even closer and it's kind of fuzzy looking. Again, photography, not my forte. But you can see, you can get some real great observation abilities of these birds out in the wild, and it's just fun to sit and watch them doing what they do in the wild, the way that they interact with one another, and everything. Okay, on to our next species, the blue and gold macaw. As we already saw on the previous slide, that previous slide did show that there were blue and gold macaws kind of intermingling with our scarlets, and that's very typical. A lot of these parrots, the species are hanging out at least in close proximity to one another. There may be some little interactions, like you can see here, this blue and gold is kind of, I don't know, talking to these two scarlets. To me, looking at that from far away, I would interpret that as a little bit of, I don't know, maybe this one's being a little bit defensive, but at the same time, I'm looking at just a photo moment in time. So I might be misinterpreting what's actually going on in that photo. But these two right here, you can see they were this was like a bonded mated pair, and it was after they were on that clay lick and eating some of that clay material. After they're done with that, they fly off and they'll go hang out in the trees very close by, so that you can observe them. And again, just kind of watch what it is that they're doing, how they're interacting, and really getting to kind of get up close and personal and know a little bit more about what happens out there in the wild with them. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the clay licks, because the clay licks actually are something that is really important for those wild parrots. They really travel to those clay licks every day, it seems. And we would get up before the sunrise to essentially meet the birds at the clay lick, because those birds are out there pretty much first thing in the morning. Once the sun is just coming up, once there's a little bit of light, those birds are traveling to the clay lick to get some of that clay. And there's many theories as to why they do that behavior. Why is it that parrots eat clay out there in the wild? And I think there's some data to support different things, but I do think it still seems like there's some stuff that we don't quite know or haven't totally committed to as, okay, this is the only reason that they do this behavior, or what have you. But the thoughts of why they're going to those clay licks is there's important minerals there. In the earth, there's lots of minerals, your sodium, chloride, that they are actually getting from the earth. The other thought is that it neutralizes some toxins. There are some things in clay, like bentonite clay, that have been studied in captive birds, not in our parrots that I'm aware of, but like in chickens. There's been studies on bentonite clay, which bentonite clay is like in the earth there, at those clay licks. It actually has been found to neutralize some toxins that can be present, and maybe a protective factor for parrots. There's other possible benefits associated with the clay licks that we just don't know. And so it's interesting because, is it that this is happening just purely because they need these minerals and maybe because they're neutralizing toxins, versus there's some other reason that it's important for them to get this stuff. Having been out there and watched the birds do this behavior of flying out there in the mornings to get to that clay lick, I have to say, when I went home and watched my own birds' behavior, it made a lot more sense what they were doing in the morning time, like how active my parrots are at home in the morning time, how there's a lot of, number one, they seem like they're starving in the morning time and they just want to eat really early. And they're agitated and like, doing things that kind of let me know that, hey, I want to eat. But then they're also doing a lot of socializing in the morning time and watching these birds. What do they do first? They flew to the clay licks, they're eating, they're getting their fill, I guess, of the clay for whatever fills them up or whatever satisfies their need. And then they're going into the trees and they're socializing. My pet birds, watching them in captivity after having been there, it really made me go, oh my gosh, well, I get why they're doing these things at particular times of day, because it kind of mimicking a little bit of what they're doing in the wild, even though they're not in the wild. They're still doing a lot of these behaviors that happen in the wild, which is really kind of really neat to see and realize. Okay, on to the green wings. So green wing macaw was already actually in one of the last photos that we saw as well, hanging out on that clay lick, but looking at them just kind of in the trees amongst the other birds, you can kind of spot a few individuals, like here's a green wing hanging out here. You can see some blue and golds hanging out on this tree, some scarlets as well. But intermittently, you'll find a green wing in there. And then kind of this one showing them up close a little bit more. Here's two hanging out, one flying past, one hiding in the background. And when you get really close and you look throughout the foliage here, like you can see there's actually so many of them hanging out in the trees. And it's just super cool to observe that, because when you're at a distance, it's hard sometimes to see that little red dot in there and recognize that it's a bird. But when you stop and observe for longer, I mean, how many birds are in here? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 birds, excluding this one that's flying past. And like, who knows how many others are kind of hidden amongst the foliage that my eyes are not catching right now. Just one of the fun facts about the green-winged macaw is it's one of the largest macaws, and it's second in size to the hyacinth. I think a lot of parrot owners know that the hyacinth macaw is really that big guy that's out there, but the green-wing is actually pretty big too, and it's just second in size to that hyacinth. Okay, next is the cobalt-winged parakeet. Not as common in the pet bird trade anymore. It is a Brotigerus parrot. So if you look at the genus and species name, the cobalt-winged parakeet name is just like the common name that it goes by. And a lot of times there's many different common names, because this is the common name that we're going to use maybe in English language, right? But then in other languages, there's going to be a different common name. So we always have the Latin name, which is going to consist of two names, the genus name and then the species name. And then some individuals, there's going to be a subspecies name. But that Latin name allows us to know specifically who we're talking about, because sometimes common names, different people will call the same bird by a different common name and it can get confusing, but the Latin name always stays the same. So the Brotigerus genus, I have a few Brotigerus patients, and they're real cute little patients, or pet birds. They're small, they're a little bit bigger than a budgie. They're not quite cockatiel size. They're not quite green cheek conure size. They're like a little smaller than a green cheek conure. They're real cute little birds. They tend to be very sweet, but they're not as common in the pet bird trade, I think, as they used to be. And when that happens, I always wonder myself, like, well, hey, this little species is kind of really nice and really sweet, and why isn't it more common as a pet bird? And my guess, they used to, many years ago when they were more common in the pet trade, the Protogerus genus was found to very commonly have an infectious disease, mycobacteriosis, which the Mycobacterium genus of bacteria are kind of a little bit more nasty bacteria sometimes. Mycobacterium tuberculosis is the agent that causes the disease tuberculosis. The Mycobacterium genus that's in birds is usually not Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It's a couple different other ones of mycobacteria that are more common in the birds, but it's still kind of, we know humans, when they get tuberculosis, it's kind of a nasty infection. Well, when birds get it, it can be a nasty infection as well, and kind of be like this chronic infection that slowly kind of creeps up on you and causes problems over a prolonged period of time. And it seemed like a lot of the Protogerus parrots actually had that particular infection. And so my guess is, unfortunately, a lot of them did pass away. My guess is that might be why they're not so common in the pet trade anymore. Maybe because of that organism kind of causing, unfortunately, a lot of premature deaths, and maybe people identified, hey, this particular species doesn't do as well in captivity because of this particular infectious agent being so common amongst them, is my suspicion. I don't know if that's, you know, necessarily the main reason, but it seemed like that might be the case. Interestingly, the Protogerus, they nest in abandoned termite nests that are in trees. So like, you know, termites like to eat like wood pulp, right? And so a termite will make their nest in a tree. And when the termites abandon that nest that they've had, the Protogerus parrots actually will go and occupy it, and they'll nest inside of there. And so there's a part of me that also wonders, like, well, maybe because the termites are breaking up the soil and earth and like, you know, creating these breaking up wood pulp and everything, and that Mycobacterium bacteria tends to exist very commonly in soil. Maybe this is why those Protogerus parrots were identified to have that bacterial organism more. Like maybe they were getting it from their nesting and then getting captured and taken into captivity. Well, maybe that stressed them and allowed something that was kind of being kept in check, okay, once in captivity becomes a problem. Again, that's just speculation. I don't know that that's a fact, but those are just some thoughts I've had go through my head as I've learned more about this particular group of birds. Okay, next is the mealy Amazon. The mealy Amazon, this photo here, at first when you look at it, it looks like there's just rainforest, right? But when you look a little closer, you'll notice that this little thing here, there's yellow, there's some red, some black. That's actually an Amazon parrot that's coming in for a landing. And as you look closer, you see all these little green spots. All those little green spots are a bunch of Amazons. Again, hanging out more on a clay lick area where they are ingesting some of that soil. As we get a little closer and actually look through spotting scopes, we can see a couple of mealy Amazons hanging out with a few other types of parrots we're going to get to in a moment. And you can see the mealy and interacting with the scarlet, where I guess maybe they're fighting over this particular location of who's going to hang out here and who needs to move. The mealies, I think, are really neat. They're the largest Amazon. I don't have a ton of mealy Amazon patients come into the hospital, but whenever I do, like you can tell, it's a mealy. Because they're so big compared to all the other Amazons. Like they're easily a 600 to 700 gram parrot versus, you know, most of our other Amazons. They may range from like the smaller guys being in the mid 200s to like the 450 range. So there's definitely a difference in size between mealies and the other guys. As far as the nesting areas that these guys like to go into, they like to nest in the holes of palm trees. So nothing like too unique, but something that was able to be observed out there. But I do think that these guys are really pretty cool Amazons, in my personal opinion. All right. So as you kind of looked at that photo of the birds on the clay lick, you noticed that there were a couple of other species on there. And the one that I want to talk about next is the chestnut-fronted macaw. So the chestnut-fronted macaw is considered a mini macaw, and it's the largest of the mini macaws. It's also known as the severe macaw. So when you look at this photo up here, there's actually 3 different species of parrots. We're going to focus on this one right here, our chestnut-fronted macaw. And you can see why they have that name is because this little like band of feathers that's right up front just beyond the nostrils is chestnut colored. And again, this is also me taking a photo through a spotting scope, so it's a little fuzzy. Again, I apologize that I'm not the best photographer, but so the chestnut coloring doesn't even come through as nice as it does in real life on this photo. But when you see a chestnut-fronted macaw, you know why it has that name. But again, the other name is severe macaw. And when you question, well, why the 2 differences in names? Well, that severe macaw name kind of comes from the genus species name. The genus is Ara, which is the macaws, and then severa, the particular species. So we actually have 2 of them right here. You can't see the chestnut front on this one as easily because his head is kind of turned towards that clay lick, but you can see these 2 guys interacting. And again, that was just probably one of the best things, was just watching these birds out in the wild interacting and socializing is really a lot of fun. And when we go to this more sort of pulled out photo where we see them hanging out again on the clay lick, all these different birds are enjoying. Look at this mealy down here. These are 3 mealy Amazons, and they're just enjoying picking up and grabbing parts of that clay and ingesting it. And I don't know, looking at these 2 little guys hanging out over here, it looks like they're just having a nice morning conversation as they are ingesting their clay. So I'm anthropomorphizing a little bit there, but I don't know, I think it's fun. Okay, the next one, I don't think I have ever seen this particular species in captivity. This is the red-bellied macaw. And it gets its name from the red color on its lower abdomen. And unfortunately, none of these pictures show that red color very well. This one probably identifies it the best, but even based on the lighting, it's a little hard to tell. But it's a little bit more red on that lower abdominal area. When we were out there, you could see it and you could tell, okay, I can tell why they get that name, that red belly, when they turn around or fly onto something and it kind of flashes and you see it. I just didn't get any great photos of it that I felt like were good ones to show. So you can see I have my photo credit down here because all these photos are not mine. These are from ebird.org that shows them a little bit more closely, a little bit more in detail so that you guys get a better picture of what this particular species looks like. It's also interesting, some of these macaws that are not as commonly kept, if you look at the skin on their face, like you can tell that they're a little bit more yellowish on the skin on their face. So I think that's kind of neat too, because that's a little bit different from the macaws that we see more frequently, like our, again, blue and golds and scarlets and green wings. But they were a real neat one to see out there. Okay, the white-bellied caique, a pretty common little bird that is in the pet trade. Now, I thought they were really fun to see because, man, are these little birds tough. They were hanging out with the Amazons and the macaws. I mean, for anybody who has a white-bellied caique, you know that they're not very big. They're smaller sized birds. And to be hanging out with the big guys and interacting amongst them, I think makes them, pretty bold little birds. And they were holding their own out there. But they were a little harder for me to get photos of because they were a little bit more rapidly like in and out. Their behavior was a bit different. So again, I have more. All these are, my photo credit is down here because all these photos are taken from pictures that I got sourced through the internet. Because I just couldn't get a good one easily on my own. But again, going back to that behavior of them, how it was different from some of the other birds that were out there, whereas your big macaws are kind of hanging out on that clay lake and kind of dominating that area. There's going to be little disputes between individuals and maybe some of like the bigger mealies and stuff. these guys, they had to, though they were hanging out amongst the other guys, they were coming in and out a little bit more rapidly. So like they were flying in, getting some of that clay and flying off. They weren't like hanging out on the clay lick as long of a period of time. I think because, you know, they were smart. They knew that they needed to get in, get their resource and get out of there and not cause too many waves. Okay, the orange-cheeked parrot. So this was one of the ones I said when I just mentioned things at the beginning. This particular species is, again, not very common in the pet trade at all. I don't think I've ever seen one of these guys in captivity. This was my first time actually seeing this particular parrot ever, and I think actually probably learning about this parrot. I don't know that I knew about this parrot before I went out there and got to see them. They're also known as the Barabans parrot, and you can kind of see that based off of their species name, the Barabandi, that name of Barabans parrot. But you can really see why they're called the orange-cheeked parrot. Here they are in this photo here. And again, this is through a spotting scope and a little far away, but you can actually see some of those orange cheeks on the birds who are showing us the sides of their face. And like, if you look at this guy, this blue and gold macaw is kind of flying in, so his feathers are kind of covering up his face ever so slightly, but you see that bright orange cheek on that little guy's face. This little guy that's flying at us here, you can see the orange on either side of his beak. And like this guy over here, look at how defensive he's being against this blue and gold macaw. He's telling the blue and gold macaw to get away. But look, you can see on his beak, or on the side of his cheek there, how orange that is. Very vibrant, easy to tell what species we were seeing once you got a glimpse of the side of their face. And definitely easy to tell why they got that name of orange-cheeked parakeet. They, as far as where they live in Northwest to Central South America. Again, I just really have never seen these guys in captivity, so a real treat to get to see them in the wild out there. And again, look at how they're interacting with all these different other types of species of parrot out there on those clay licks. Okay, the blue-headed Pyonis. The Pyonis are ones that we see more frequently in captivity. And I do have several blue-headed Pyonis parrot patients. I think they're great little birds. They have great little personalities. One thing that's interesting about the Pyonis genus is they have red undertail covert feathers. So you can't really see it too well other than just tiny little bit down here, right at the base of this photograph, but there are some red feathers there. Again, not a photo of mine. Here's my photo credit down here. This one's a photo of mine. This one was at, again, the clay lick, taken through a spotting scope. And you can actually see we've got a whole bunch of the Barabans, or the orange-cheeked parrots here. And again, you see that like bright orange cheek, identifying those guys. But then if you look off to the side, you'll notice a group of a few other individuals with a nice bright blue head, but a very short little tail and overall smaller body size. So that's how we were able to identify those guys as the blue-headed Pyonis, because it's shorter tail length, smaller body size that is more consistent with our, our Pyonis, our Amazons, but then this nice vibrant blue head there. Next, the yellow-fronted Amazon. We did not see as many of these, but they were kind of coming in and out. Every once in a while, you'd catch a glimpse of the yellow-fronted Amazon. But I was not able to secure a good photo at all of the yellow-fronted Amazon because we just didn't see a ton of them, and they were kind of off in the distance when they were around. So all of these photos, I have my photo credit down there at the bottom. The yellow-fronted Amazon, again, it goes by many different common names. It's also known as the yellow-crowned Amazon. So it's kind of sometimes easier to stick to the Latin name because there is a little bit of variability as well in like how much yellow is on their head. And there's several different subspecies of this particular group. So Amazona orchocephala is the genus species name. And again, there actually are several subspecies of this particular group. And that the difference in the subspecies is kind of that degree of yellowing on the head. And you can kind of see in the different photos that variability. Like this guy's over here, even though this is kind of a little bit of a pixelated photo, you can tell he's not as vibrant yellow as like this guy over here, who's really quite vibrant yellow. And just because we still have some questions about like different species and how they're related and everything. Some will lump them with the yellow-naped and yellow-headed Amazon, and DNA does actually support that. DNA evidence, as we have used DNA to be able to tell the differences between species better. It actually does look like the yellow-fronted Amazon, the yellow-naped, and the yellow-headed Amazon are quite closely related and may just be subspecies of one another. I'm sure we'll learn more about that as time goes on. Okay, this one was really cool to see as well, and I feel like I'm saying that about everybody, but I hope at the end everybody just realizes the whole trip was really cool because of how many different birds we saw. But this one was the blue-headed macaw. Now, I already showed you this particular photo before of the severe macaws or the chestnut-fronted macaws, but if you look up from them, you have this one particular little guy over here who is also a type of mini macaw, who's kind of hanging out right in front of them. And you can kind of see, I think this is actually the same individual. This severe macaw's friend just took off, so he's just still kind of hanging out in that same spot. But what's kind of neat about them that I'll try to point out in this photo. Okay, look at the severe macaw here. Remember how on the red-bellied macaw, I pointed out the facial skin as being a little bit more yellow. And in a lot of the parrots, a lot of our macaws, we see more of like a white facial skin. So the severe macaw, white facial skin, the facial skin of the scarlet macaw over here is white. If you look at the blue-headed macaw, the facial skin and like kind of around the loins and everything, they're gray. And so it's hard because when you look at that photo, you kind of go like, and to me, when I look at this, again, it's also a little bit blurry, but it looks like those are feathers on the face, but it's not. It is the normal exposed facial skin like we see on a lot of our macaws, but in the blue-headed macaw, it's gray. So that was really interesting. But then what I also found to be interesting is like, look at his feet. He's got pink feet. He doesn't have gray feet. So like, I think it's, I don't know, just an interesting thing to note that a lot of our macaws have white faces and gray feet, white face and gray feet, but the blue-headed macaw has a gray face and white feet. That's interesting. Like why the flip-flop, I don't know. But again, also a species that I personally have not seen in captivity, just one that I've had the great pleasure of getting to see out in the wild, and certainly some morphologic differences from our other macaws that on first evaluation makes you go, is that a macaw? But in fact, it is. Okay, next is a couple of our smaller guys, and the first one is the white-eyed parakeet. They're also known as the white-eyed conure. It does seem like there is a little bit of a difference. Here in North America, it seems like we say conure much more frequently than other parts of the world. I noticed when I was down in Peru, they use the word parakeet more. And also when I was in Patagonia, and we saw the austral parakeet, they were calling it the austral parakeet, whereas here in North America, we tend to call it the austral conure. So it's interesting to visit other countries because you can kind of see the differences in terminology. Which again goes back to the fact that it's really important to use those Latin names so we know who we're actually talking about. But the white-eyed parakeet, they were small, they were hard to get photos of that were adequate enough to show you guys that they were the white-eyed parakeet or conure. So again, I took these photos with my photo credit down there, taken from ebird.org, to show you guys a little bit more closely what they look like. They have that sort of white exposed skin around the eye. Now there's other conures that have that too. So why did somebody choose to call this one the white-eyed parakeet or white-eyed conure? I don't know. But you know, that's a distinguishing feature. What I noticed to tell them apart from others is like how little red speckling they have along different parts of their head. And it's variable from one individual to next. Like this guy obviously has quite a bit more, but this guy is a little bit bare, but they have just little red feather speckling coming out. And I have seen these guys in captivity, but I think I've probably seen like 2 in my career, so not super common in the pet trade. And then we have the mitred conure. The mitred conure is one that certainly is a little bit more common in the pet trade. It's also often confused with the red-fronted conure or the red-masked conure. And the reason behind that is because they look very, very similar. So the mitred, the red-fronted, and the red-masked all look really, really close. You can see that they do have the same genus names, so they're all Psittacara for the genus, but then the mitred conure species is Psittacara mitratus. The red-fronted conure is Psittacara wagleri, and I've also heard them called the wagleri conure. And then the red-masked conure is Psittacara erythrogenes. Now, what's the difference? The red-fronted conure is red on the red on the forehead does not go below the eye. So if you look at these photos of our mitred conure, you can actually see, though there is a little bit of difference in how red their heads are, the red is going below the eye on the mitrids, whereas the red-fronted conure, the red does not go below that eye. And then the red-masked conure, there is red on the underwing coverts. So this photo here is trying to show that difference from the mitred conure, where there's going to be more red on those coverts under here, whereas the mitred, who's in flight in this photo, again, this is taken, photo credit is from eBird, so someone who's a really good photographer out there got this great photo. If this was a red-masked conure, it'd be more red, but because it's a mitred conure, it's showing that it's more green in those underwing coverts. So a group of birds that we do see more frequently in captivity, that's easy to confuse, but just a couple of features to point out that help us to identify who's who. Okay, so those were all the species that I saw out there. I wanted to just kind of show you a little bit more, just a few photos of that Tambopato Nature Center, and just kind of show you what's out there so that you guys can see a little bit of the work that they're doing. And if you want to go, I would encourage you to go and visit as well, because it's a great experience. But this was, I think, when we were getting to the facility, and it's just kind of this really neat, again, eco lodge that they have there that's really exposed to the elements so that you can really kind of live in nature for the few days that you're out there. But because this particular research center is actually a true active research center, and they are doing research in the rainforest, looking at different species. Again, I mentioned at the beginning, the severe macaw is one of the individual species that they've done a lot of work with. And this up here is showing one of the nesting boxes that they've placed up in the canopy there for the severe macaws to nest in. Here it is on the ground. So it's taken down and you can actually see the nest opening. It looks like this one doesn't have a top on it, but normally there is a top. I think they just took the top off so that like we could see what it looks like on the inside. So if you look at it from the inside, there's that little opening that the macaw would come in through, just a couple of different little platforms, but then a base down it that it would be hanging out in. And that's, a place that they like to nest. It looks small, but they like that. They like that tiny little enclosed environment to make them feel kind of safe in there with their young. And you can see like this little rope right here. That's actually how they're like hoisting it up by a pulley system to get up into the canopy at a level where the birds have access to it. And then just a few parting photos here before we get on to answering any questions that anybody has. Just trying to show the nature around there. Again, we were staying at the research center in the little individual lodge rooms, but then we would get up real early in the morning time, go down to a boat, take a little boat ride over to where we would get to these places where we would observe the birds. And this is just one of the observation areas. We're out on just a little sort of beach area, you could say. And here is a big open face area that is a wonderful clay lick for the parrots to be on. Again, another clay lick. This one we actually saw as we were along a boat. So this was a photo taken from the boat itself that we were just like going down along the river. And it was not a stopping point. It was just a place that, hey, look, there's a shelf of earth that's exposed that the parrots are taking advantage of and getting to that soil. A photo over here just showing all the different birds hanging out in the canopy area. I mean, again, look at how many species and how many individuals are out there. Like here's a green wing, we've got a scarlet, we've got some blue and golds up there. And these guys are the bigger ones, right? So I know that there's other species mixed in there that I'm missing because they're smaller. And our Amazons, who are more green colored, are a little harder to see when we're kind of zoomed out here, but just how many individuals are hanging out there, which is really awesome to see. These two photos here in the center were like early morning photos. So this is early in the morning when the sun's coming up and you can't really see like who these guys are so much, but we can tell it's a macaw because how long that tail is. Another macaw hanging out in here. I think it's a blue and gold, but it's hard to see early in the morning, but there's some guy who's coming in and observing that clay lick off in the corner that he's going to be flying to be getting some of the clay from. And one thing that was kind of interesting, here's a clay lick down in the corner that you can see, and birds would be along there, and we're actually across a river area from where that clay lick is, where we're able to observe them. You see this sign here, it says, "Keep in silence, please," because we're trying to not disrupt nature. Like, we want to preserve nature. We want to make sure that these animals are not stressed by our appearance. And so we have to, be quiet, and we're just watching them, observing them, seeing what they're doing. But all these birds suddenly took off. And that's because of, they suddenly hear some sort of sound that upsets them off in the distance, and somebody does an alarm call and everybody goes. So it was just a real interesting photo because moments before this was taken, all these birds were hanging out down here, and then something happened and everybody's like, okay, time to take off. And they may just take off and do like a little loop around, a couple loops around, and then come back and go back to the clay lick if everything seems to be okay, or they may take off and go into the trees and slowly be coming down as they feel more comfortable, depending upon whatever it is that happened that made them take off in the first place. So that is it that I have for my presentation. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I'd love to take any questions that anybody has.
Okay, well, that was fabulous. Oh my gosh, that blue-headed macaw, I've never, or the
I know, aren't they neat?
amazing. Okay, wow. We do have some questions. Linda wants to know, is the red-bellied macaw the same bird as the red-fronted macaw? So the red front and the red belly, are they the same?
No, they are different. They are different species. And I didn't even get to see any red-fronted macaws there.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I was just curious while we were, okay, another question. This one I've seen this question through the years because you see these pictures of them on the clay licks, right? The birds, the parrots are all enjoying the clay lick. So should we provide any kind of clay lick to our domestic Amazons? Like, do you see any, and also, do you see any non-citizens on the clay licks? So we have the clay licks. So is there any equivalent that you can provide here as a domestic pet?
Yeah. So Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I have that same question myself of should we be providing our parrots clay lick access to some sort of clay that they can chew on and be helpful for them in some way. And on the one hand, I want to say, yeah, we should do that. But on the other hand, I don't know if we know enough, and I don't know if we have a good resource. There is bentonite clay, like you can get bentonite clay. People do use bentonite clay for other things. Um, so it is out there, but I just don't know how safe it is yet for us to use it in our pet birds. Me going out there and observing this makes me say it's got to be safe. Hopefully, it's safe, but I don't know that I can easily say that yet with certainty to say, hey, everybody go out there and buy some bentonite clay off of Amazon and start giving it to your birds. I'm not suggesting that because I don't know enough or have enough data to say like how we should do it in captivity either. Like these birds in the wild, they're going out there in the morning times. They're spending a couple of hours out there. But they're exposed to lots of different things too. So again, one of the things we think the clay is doing is it's neutralizing toxins. And so maybe they're not getting exposed to those toxins as much with the diets that we're currently feeding them. And so like, is it as necessary? I don't know. But then, also we think, well, it's for the source of minerals and stuff. But when we feed them our diets in captivity, well, they're getting some minerals there, but maybe they're not getting enough, or maybe they're getting too much. So there's still a lot that we don't know, but there's a big part of me that thinks that yes, at some point we really need to figure this out better and probably provide them at least with something similar. And I do think it's like mentally stimulating for them as well. And when I take my birds outside personally and watch them walk around, I mean, for sure my Amazon Arroyo, he likes to chew on rocks and things. And my gray, like she likes to dig around in the dirt. Now, interestingly, my blue and gold macaw, she won't like come off. She likes to stay up on things. She doesn't really like to climb down and walk around on the ground and interact with dirt and soil so much. But I don't know how much of that is because of it's not her thing. Like she's not interested in it. So the ultimate answer is I don't know.
Okay. And did you see other non-parrot species on the clay licks?
So I didn't see other non-parrot species on the clay licks, but we saw other birds close by. Like we saw a king vulture hanging out not too far at all from where all the parrots were at the clay licks. So I didn't include his photo, but he was a really neat bird to see.
Okay. Okay. And how many how many species in Peru are endangered? Do you know?
Ooh,
Yeah.
I wish I had the specifics for you. I don't know that actual number. I'm sure there's somebody out there who knows that specific number and could quote it, but I don't know. I'm sure it is a significant amount, but I don't know the actual number.
Okay. Okay. And then is anyone looking at the genetics of the yellow-headed / yellow-fronted, etc. Amazons and the white-eye, red-fronted Amazon conures to determine relatedness? So are
Yeah, I
they?
think there's a lot of that actually going on to identify not only identify the species a little bit better, but also like the subspecies, how they're related, and even identifying like the genetic differences between different populations in like different countries. Like, okay, maybe this particular parrot is in Peru, but it's also in Bolivia, and like, what's the genetic difference between the one that's in Peru versus the species that's in Bolivia? I do know that there are different researchers out there that have been working on a variety of different species with that information.
Okay. And then so someone says, as I have a blue-headed Pyonis, were there any specific info that you learned about how they live in the wild, like food or behavior? So the Pyonis, they're always
More
like
more specific about the Pyonis that I learned from observing them.
yeah.
Is
Did you
that
learn
what they're asking?
anything that you weren't unexpected, perhaps,
Anything unexpected?
or how they ate or foraged or any kind of behaviors that stood out to you?
I mean, they hung out more with the smaller guys, I guess. I didn't see them as much with the larger ones. I mentioned how the Kayaks, how like they were coming in with the bigger guys, like, and so that was unique and stood out to me as something I watched. But the Pyonis, it seemed like they were kind of hanging out more with individuals of similar size. I was there for like 3 days, so I'm also like, there's going to be differences from one day to the next and maybe season from one season to another. So like I bet if I was out there all the time, I'd have way more really good little scientific notes to give you more specifics about that one, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now, no.
Okay, I'm just curious, like if you saw any kind of behaviors that we might see with like hikes, like hopping, like they do the hopping, and you see them all in the cute little bit. Do you see any of that in the wild? Like,
I don't think I observed that, no. But again, they're on the claylix, right? So it's kind of like a sheer face. So it'd be a little hard to hop on that sheer face, I think. But maybe if they were down on a more flat surface, I might have observed that.
okay. And then were there like differences in flock sizes? Like are some of them more like like condensed, like a lot of them flocking together as opposed to like a couple pairs of different species?
I would say like when they were coming in to the claylix, like you would typically see them in groups of 2 or 3. For the macaws, like the macaws were either in groups of 2 or groups of 3. The Amazons, it seems like they were coming in like anywhere from 3 to 5 sometimes as groups. Now, when there was a loud noise or something that disturbed them, or somebody gave an alarm call, like everybody took off, and then the flock was huge, But generally, when they were just coming in as individuals to that claylix, anywhere from 2 birds to 5 bird grouping.
Okay. Okay. And then I just wanted to, let's see if everyone, let's see the raise your hand feature. I'm just curious how many people that joined us today have any of these birds as companions, like as a pet, that you saw on the 14 species list here. Just, all right, let's see if we have time. Oh, we got 7, 6. We have people raising their hands. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm guessing some Amazons, some of the caws, some conures.
Yeah, maybe the caique, the white belly caique.
Okay. Yeah, where is the only the white belly there? The black is the black.
Hey, I don't know. I would have to look that up. To be honest, I am not sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's I mean they're kind of similar but different, right? So okay. So that was yeah, someone had asked if this is going to be a recording of this, and yes, you can go back and see Dr. Lamb's presentation. And again, like the PowerPoint is just always worth a relook because there's so much information to glean from there. Especially at the beginning, you had that list down packed with all the bird and like little inset bubble to see closer up. That was just really good visuals there. I appreciate that. And then, okay, so Dr. Lamb, I get to see you at the beginning of September at AFA in Costa Mesa, California. I'm super excited. And if anyone is there in California or drivable or flyable, come join us and we'll all meet in person at AFA.
It's going to be exciting to get to. I haven't actually ever gotten to meet you in person. So many times we've been here on these webinars, so it's been awesome to meet you in person. And I hope anybody who does get to view these webinars frequently is able to come out there and see us at the AFA. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, and I kind of want to do a group photo if we'll put up on the next
that
webinar.
would be fun.
Yeah, like our webinar attendee group, like that'd be awesome. So I really do hope that people can join us. Extremely excited about that. That's coming up so fast. We're already in August and we're heading straight for September. It's going to be the first weekend in September for that, the 4th through the 7th. So all right. I got to announce today's giveaway winner real quick. So it's going to be the strawberry Nutriberries and plus another product of your bird's choosing. And that is going to Patricia. Patricia Handel, congratulations. Hope that makes you and your bird's weekend. And okay, just real quick, next Friday we're going to be on Lisa Bono, and she is going to give us some behavior techniques to prepare your birds for a big move. So tune in then. And oh man, we got through a lot. Totally appreciate your time, Dr. Lamb. And I hope, once again, hope you guys can all join us at AFA. I'm looking forward to it. Till next time, guys. Everyone have a great weekend. All the best to you and your flock. Stay safe. Bye.